A girl used to collecting garbage entered an abandoned building in search of something to eat. There she found a wounded and chained man who begged her to run. But instead, she shared her only water with him and decided to save him. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. In the grey light of dawn, 12-year-old Lily Matthews moved like a shadow through the abandoned buildings of East Detroit. Her small frame, dressed in layers of mismatched clothes, navigated the urban ruins with practiced ease. She'd learned long ago that the early morning was the best time to scavenge, before other scrappers arrived and before security guards began their patrols. The abandoned Packard plant stretched before her like a concrete maze, its broken windows staring out like hollow eyes. Once the pride of Detroit's automotive industry, now it stood as a monument to forgotten dreams. For Lily, however, it was simply a treasure trove of possibilities. Copper wiring, aluminum, anything that could be exchanged for a few dollars at Brady's scrapyard down the street. Lily had been on her own since her mother, Diane, had disappeared 3 years ago. "I'll be back with dinner, baby girl," she'd said, kissing Lily's forehead before walking out the door of their apartment. Lily had waited 3 days before the landlord came knocking, demanding rent. By the end of the week, she'd been on the streets, learning to survive in a world that seemed determined to ignore her existence. Today, her stomach growled with a familiar emptiness. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, half a sandwich discarded by a businessman near Campus Martius Park. She needed to find something valuable, and fast. Slipping through a gap in the chain-link fence, Lily entered the eastern wing of the plant, an area she hadn't fully explored yet. The morning sunlight filtered through broken skylights, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn floor. Her experienced eyes scanned for the telltale glint of metal or anything else that might be worth something. A faint sound stopped her in her tracks, something between a groan and a whisper coming from below. Lily froze, her heart racing. Most of Detroit's homeless knew better than to venture this deep into abandoned buildings, and the sound was too human to be a stray animal. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely audible. Silence answered her. She debated with herself. Every instinct honed from years on the street told her to run to avoid trouble at all costs. But something, curiosity or perhaps a loneliness she rarely acknowledged, made her move toward a partially collapsed stairwell leading to what must have been a basement level. "Is someone there?" she called again, her voice echoing against concrete walls. Another sound, definitely human this time. Lily descended the stairs cautiously, testing each step before committing her weight. The basement was darker, the air thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, creating a rhythmic backdrop to her shallow breathing. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw him, a man chained to a support beam in the center of the room. His head hung forward, dark hair matted, with what looked like dried blood. His once expensive shirt was torn and filthy, revealing bruised skin beneath. Despite his condition, the Rolex watch still clinging to his swollen wrist told Lily that this was someone from another world entirely, the world of high-rise offices and luxury cars that occasionally gleamed through downtown Detroit. She approached cautiously, ready to bolt at the slightest threat. The man's eyes fluttered open, bloodshot and feverish, focusing on her with visible effort. "Run," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "Dangerous. They'll be back." Lily stood, motionless, studying him. For the first time in her memory, an adult was looking at her not with disgust or pity, but with genuine concern, for her safety, not his own. She should run, just as he said. That's what 3 years of street survival had taught her. Avoid trouble, look out for yourself, trust no one. But the man's breathing was labored, his skin pallid beneath the dirt and blood. Without medical attention, he wouldn't last much longer. "Who did this to you?" Lily whispered, inching closer. "Doesn't matter," he managed, coughing weakly. "Please, just go." Instead, Lily unzipped her worn backpack and pulled out a plastic water bottle, her only one, half full with slightly cloudy water. She uncapped it and held it to his cracked lips. He drank desperately, water spilling down his chin. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes clearer now. "I'm Ethan. Ethan Crawford." The name meant nothing to Lily, but something in his gaze held her there. She rummaged through her backpack again, this time pulling out a rusty pocket knife she used for cutting copper wire from abandoned appliances. "I'm going to try to get you out," she said, examining the chains. They were thick, industrial-grade links, far too strong for her small knife. But the padlock holding them together looked older, possibly susceptible to picking. Lily had learned that particular skill from an old homeless man named Pete before he disappeared last winter. "They'll kill you if they find you," Ethan warned, his voice stronger after the water. "Nobody notices me," Lily replied simply, working the tip of her knife into the lock. "I'm invisible." It took nearly 20 minutes of painstaking effort before the lock finally gave way with a satisfying click. The chains fell away, and Ethan's arms dropped limply to his sides, muscles atrophied from days of restraint. "Can you walk?" Lily asked, already knowing the answer from his condition. Ethan attempted to stand, using the beam for support, but his legs buckled immediately. "Give me a minute," he gasped, pain etched across his features. Lily glanced nervously toward the stairs. "We don't have a minute. Someone could come." Making a decision, she positioned herself beside him, slipping her small shoulder under his arm. Despite her size, years of hauling scrap metal had given her a wiry strength. "Lean on me," she instructed. Together they made their way slowly across the basement floor, each step a battle. Ethan was clearly fighting unconsciousness, his breathing ragged and sweat beading on his forehead despite the basement's chill. The stairs presented an almost insurmountable challenge. Twice Ethan nearly collapsed, and Lily's small frame strained under his weight, but a stubborn determination kept them moving upward, one excruciating step at a time. When they finally emerged into the main floor, the daylight revealed Ethan's condition more clearly. His face was badly bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. Dried blood caked his hairline, and his expensive slacks were torn and filthy. "Why are you helping me?" he asked as they paused for him to catch his breath. Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. "Nobody else was going to," she said finally. They made their slow way through the labyrinthine building, Lily carefully guiding them along a route that avoided potential hazards. Collapsed floors, exposed rebar, areas where security sometimes patrolled. Ethan leaned heavily against her, his strength clearly fading. "I need to rest," he finally admitted as they reached the perimeter fence. "Not here," Lily insisted. "It's not safe." "Where then?" he asked, his voice faint. Lily hesitated. She never brought anyone to her shelter, her home. It was the one safe place she had in the world. But Ethan's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and she couldn't leave him. "I know a place," she said reluctantly, "but it's a bit of a walk." They slipped through the fence and into the streets of East Detroit. Morning had fully arrived now, the streets beginning to stir with early workers. A few glanced curiously at the odd pair, a small ragged girl supporting a clearly injured man in torn business attire. But in a neighborhood accustomed to averting its eyes from difficulty, no one approached or offered help. Lily guided them through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main roads where they might attract attention. Ethan stumbled alongside her, occasionally mumbling incoherently as fever took a stronger hold. "Almost there," Lily encouraged as they approached, an abandoned lot overgrown with weeds and surrounded by a rusty chain-link fence. In the center of the lot sat an old school bus, its yellow paint faded to a patchy beige, windows either boarded up or covered with salvaged pieces of cardboard. "That's your place?" Ethan asked, momentarily lucid. "Home sweet home," Lily replied, with a hint of defensiveness. "Nobody bothers me here." Lily helped Ethan through a small gap in the fence that surrounded her sanctuary. Each step seemed to drain what little energy he had left, and by the time they reached the bus, he was barely conscious, his weight becoming increasingly difficult for her small frame to support. The door of the bus had long ago been jammed permanently, half open, creating a narrow entrance that Lily had learned to navigate with ease. Getting Ethan through it, however, proved challenging. He groaned in pain as his injured body scraped against the metal edge. "Sorry," Lily murmured, though she wasn't accustomed to apologizing to anyone, almost inside. What greeted Ethan's bleary eyes inside the bus was unexpected. Despite Lily's ragged appearance, her living space was meticulously organized. The bus seats had been removed from one half, creating an open area where cardboard boxes had been flattened and layered to form insulation against the floor. A thin mattress, salvaged from a curbside discard, occupied one corner, covered with relatively clean blankets folded with hospital corner precision. The remaining seats had been repurposed for storage. Plastic milk crates held neatly folded clothes. Aluminum cans housed small plants growing toward the light from the windows. The walls were adorned with drawings, some clearly Lily's own work, others torn from magazines, creating a collage of color against the bus's faded interior. A collection of books, their covers, worn but treasured, sat in a neat stack beside the mattress. "Home," Lily said simply, helping Ethan to the mattress. He collapsed onto it, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion and pain. Lily watched him for a moment, uncertainty crossing her features. She'd never brought anyone here before. This was her private world, her only safe space in a city that had shown her little kindness. Yet here was this stranger, this man from another world entirely, bleeding onto her only blankets. Moving with practiced efficiency, she retrieved a plastic container that collected rainwater through a cleverly designed system of found materials extending to the bus roof. Using a relatively clean rag, she began to wipe the dirt and blood from Ethan's face. He flinched at her touch but was too weak to protest. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lily," she answered after a moment's hesitation. Names were currency on the streets, not given freely. "Lily," he repeated, as if testing the name. "Why are you helping me?" She shrugged, continuing her careful ministrations. "You needed it." As she cleaned his wounds, the full extent of his injuries became clear. Though no bones appeared to be broken, his body was a canvas of bruises and cuts. Whoever had held him captive had been methodical in their cruelty, inflicting pain without causing life-threatening damage. The worst injury appeared to be a deep gash along his hairline that had crusted over, but still looked angry and inflamed. "You need antibiotics," Lily said matter-of-factly. "And real food. I don't have either." She rummaged through her backpack and produced a half loaf of bread, stale but not moldy. "This is all I have right now." Ethan accepted a piece with trembling hands. "This is perfect," he said, taking a small bite. The simple act of chewing seemed to require immense effort. "You're sick," Lily observed as she noticed the flush of fever on his cheeks. "Probably an infection," Ethan agreed weakly. "How long was I in that basement?" "I don't know," Lily replied. "I just found you today." "What day is it?" "Tuesday, October 12th. Ethan closed his eyes, calculation evident in his expression. 6 days, he finally said. "They grabbed me last Wednesday night." Lily didn't ask who they were. In her experience, knowing too much about other people's troubles only invited those troubles into your own life. Instead, she focused on practical matters. "You should rest," she said, standing up. "I need to go get some supplies." Alarm flashed across Ethan's face. "Don't go, they might be looking for me, for you too now." Lily's expression remained impassive. "We need medicine, food. I know places." She hesitated before adding, "No one will notice me. They never do." There was something in her tone, a resignation that spoke of years being overlooked, ignored, invisible to the world of normal people with homes and jobs and families. Ethan felt a pang of something unfamiliar. In his world of corporate boardrooms and luxury condominiums, being noticed was currency. For Lily, invisibility was survival. "Take my watch," he said suddenly, attempting to remove the Rolex from his wrist. His fingers fumbled with the clasp. Lily stared at him. "Why?" "Sell it. Get what we need." She shook her head firmly. "They'd arrest me. No one would believe I didn't steal it." Ethan hadn't considered that reality, that a child like Lily attempting to sell an expensive watch would immediately be suspected of theft. It was the first of many realizations about her world, that would soon reshape his understanding. "How will you get supplies then?" he asked. "I have ways," she replied cryptically. "Just rest. I'll be back." Before he could protest further, she was gone, slipping out of the bus with the silent efficiency of someone accustomed to moving unnoticed through the world. Left alone, Ethan took in his surroundings more fully. Despite the obvious poverty of the conditions, there was a dignity to the space. That spoke volumes about its young resident. In one corner, a makeshift shelf held small treasures: a snow globe with the Detroit skyline, a tarnished music box, a collection of smooth stones arranged by color. A plastic bin beneath it was labeled "School" in careful handwriting and contained notebooks and pencils, evidence that Lily, despite her circumstances, still attempted to educate herself. The drawings taped to the walls ranged from childish renderings of houses and families to surprisingly skilled sketches of the Detroit cityscape. One particularly detailed drawing showed the Renaissance Center towers reflected in the Detroit River at sunset, capturing the city's faded grandeur with remarkable perception. As his gaze traveled across Lily's private universe, Ethan was struck by the revelation that this abandoned bus contained more genuine humanity than his $3 million penthouse overlooking the same river depicted in her drawings. His thoughts were interrupted by a wave of dizziness. The fever was worsening, and he could feel his consciousness slipping. Before darkness claimed him, he made a silent promise. If he survived this ordeal, he would find a way to repay the unlikely guardian angel who had saved him. When Lily returned, hours later, Ethan was delirious with fever, mumbling incoherently about meetings and deadlines and someone named Rebecca. She set down her findings: a half-full bottle of generic antibiotics obtained from an elderly woman in the neighborhood who supplemented her social security by selling her prescriptions, some canned soup from a church pantry, and a clean t-shirt. She'd managed to talk a donation center volunteer into giving her. She opened one of the antibiotic capsules and mixed the powder with water, coaxing the mixture between Ethan's cracked lips. She heated the soup using a small alcohol burner she kept for emergencies, then patiently spoon-fed him when he regained partial awareness. "My company," he murmured between spoonfuls. "They'll be looking for me." "What company?" Lily asked, more to keep him talking than out of genuine interest. "Crawford Tech. I'm the CEO, founded it 10 years ago." The name sparked a vague recognition. Lily had seen it on billboards downtown, something about software and innovation. She'd never paid much attention to the corporate logos that dotted the city. They belonged to a world as inaccessible to her as the moon. "Someone will find you," she said reassuringly, though she didn't believe it. In her experience, the world was very good at forgetting people. Ethan's hand suddenly gripped hers with surprising strength. "They wanted me to sign over control," he said, his eyes momentarily clear and focused. "The company, the patents, everything I've built. When I refused, His voice trailed off as another wave of fever overtook him. Lily gently extracted her hand from his grip and continued her careful nursing, changing the makeshift compress on his forehead when it grew warm. As night fell, the temperature in the bus dropped significantly. Lily piled her few blankets onto Ethan's shivering form and donned extra layers of clothing herself. She positioned herself on the bus floor beside the mattress, using her backpack as a pillow. She wouldn't risk sleeping in her usual spot next to the door, not with Ethan in this condition, and potentially dangerous people looking for him. Sleep came fitfully, her body accustomed to maintaining partial alertness even in rest, a necessary survival mechanism for a child alone on Detroit streets. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, she awoke to find Ethan watching her, his eyes clear for the first time since she'd found him. "You gave me your bed," he observed quietly. "You're sick," she replied matter-of-factly. "You're just a kid," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How long have you been out here alone?" Lily stiffened. Personal questions were dangerous territory. "Long enough," she answered. "Where are your parents?" "Gone." Her tone made it clear the subject was closed. Ethan seemed to understand. He shifted slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "I'm getting better," he said. "Thanks to you." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. The antibiotics helped. "Not just the medicine," Ethan insisted. "You could have left me. There, anyone else would have." "I'm not anyone else," Lily said simply. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken understanding. They were from different worlds that should never have intersected, yet here they were, survivors together in this rusted sanctuary. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through the cardboard-covered windows of the bus. Ethan awoke to find Lily already up, sitting cross-legged on the floor sorting through a small pile of metal scraps. Her nimble fingers separated copper from aluminum, organizing each into different containers with practiced efficiency. "Morning," he said, his voice stronger than it had been the previous day. The antibiotics had begun their work, and though his body still ached fiercely, the fog of fever had lifted somewhat. Lily glanced up, momentarily surprised as if she'd forgotten his presence. "You're awake," she observed. "How do you feel?" "Like, I've been hit by a truck, but better than yesterday." Ethan attempted to sit up, grimacing at the pain that shot through his ribs. "What are you doing?" "Sorting." She gestured to the metal pieces. "Copper gets the best price. Aluminum's okay. Steel isn't worth much, but Brady takes it anyway." "Brady?" "He runs the scrapyard over on Grayshot. Pays fair, doesn't ask questions." She continued her work, hands never pausing. "This is how I eat." Ethan watched her methodical movements, struck by the adult precision in such young hands. He'd built a tech empire worth billions, yet he doubted he could survive a single day in Lily's world. "How old are you, Lily?" She paused briefly. 12, I think. Maybe 13 now." The uncertainty in her answer clutched at something in Ethan's chest. "You don't know," Lily shrugged. "Lost track. My birthday's in summer, that's all I remember. Mum used to make cupcakes with pink frosting." A flicker of something, pain, nostalgia, loss, crossed her face before disappearing behind the neutral mask she typically wore. "Where is your mum now?" Ethan asked gently. "Gone." Lily's tone closed the subject. She gathered her sorted metals into a small canvas bag. "I need to take these to Brady's. There's water in that jug and more antibiotics beside it. Take one now." "You're leaving?" Ethan couldn't keep the note of alarm from his voice. "We need money for food." Her tone was matter-of-fact. "I'll be back soon." Before he could protest further, she was gone, slipping out the bus door and into the Detroit morning. Ethan was left alone with his thoughts and the silent testimony of Lily's existence surrounding him. With effort, he managed to sit fully upright and take stock of his injuries. His torso was a mosaic of bruises in various stages of blooming, but nothing felt broken. The cut on his head had begun to heal, though it remained tender to the touch. His captors had been professionals. They'd known exactly how to inflict maximum pain without causing permanent damage. They'd needed him alive and eventually functional enough to sign documents. He reached for the water jug Lily had indicated and took one of the antibiotic capsules, swallowing it with a grimace. His mind turned to his company, to the people who would be looking for him. His executive team would have noticed his absence immediately. His sister Rebecca would be frantic. Had they filed police reports? Were there search parties? Or had his kidnappers somehow covered their tracks, perhaps with a fabricated story about an unplanned vacation or business trip? The magnitude of what had happened was still sinking in. Someone had orchestrated his kidnapping, someone with resources, connections, and a powerful motivation to gain control of Crawford Tech. The list of suspects was disturbingly long. The tech industry was ruthless, and his company's recent breakthroughs in quantum computing had put them leagues ahead of competitors. The patents alone were worth billions. But his racing thoughts kept returning to Lily, a child living alone in an abandoned bus, surviving by collecting scraps of metal. The injustice of it burned in his chest alongside his physical pain. In a city where he owned multiple properties and commanded a workforce of thousands, this girl had slipped through every conceivable safety net. Moving gingerly, Ethan explored the bus that served as Lily's home. He examined her drawings more closely, noting dates penciled in corners, a makeshift timeline of her solitary existence. The earliest dated back nearly 3 years. 3 years, alone, surviving by wit and will in one of America's most challenging urban environments. A small shelf near the mattress held her book collection, mostly tattered paperbacks with broken spines. The Secret Garden, A Wrinkle in Time, The Giver, alongside more practical titles like Basic Mathematics and The Human Body, An Illustrated Guide. A notebook lay open, filled with careful handwriting, math problems, vocabulary lists, science notes, evidence of a self-directed education conducted in the absence of any formal schooling. In a plastic bin labeled Important, Ethan found a child's backpack containing what appeared to be Lily's most treasured possessions, a faded photograph of a smiling woman holding a much younger Lily on her lap, her elementary school ID card, a small teddy bear missing one eye, and a carefully folded letter on lined paper. Ethan hesitated, knowing he was intruding on her privacy, but his concern for understanding the child who had saved his life overrode his reservations. The letter, written in a flowing adult hand, read, "My darling Lily, I'm sorry for leaving you alone again. Mommy has to take care of some business, but I promise I'll be back with food, and maybe even a surprise. Be a good girl and stay quiet. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Mom." The date scrawled at the bottom corresponded with what must have been her mother's final departure. Ethan carefully replaced the letter, a heaviness settling in his chest. Whatever business had taken Lily's mother away had clearly become permanent, leaving a 9-year-old child to fend for herself rather than enter a system many considered worse than the streets. The sound of the bus door creaking announced Lily's return. She entered carrying a small paper bag, her expression brightening slightly upon seeing Ethan sitting up. "You look better," she observed, setting the bag down. "I feel better," he replied, carefully returning to the mattress to avoid appearing as though he'd been snooping. "Did you get a good price for your scraps?" $8.50, she answered, a note of pride in her voice. "Enough for today." She opened the paper bag to reveal a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a small bunch of slightly bruised bananas. Grocery store behind the plaza marks down the old fruit at noon. The meager haul, a full day's earnings, struck Ethan with the force of revelation. His watch alone was worth $20,000. The pen in his jacket pocket, now lost, had been a $500 Mont Blanc. He regularly spent more on a single business lunch than Lily might see in a month. "That's good shopping," he said, accepting the piece of peanut butter sandwich she offered. "Thank you." They ate in companionable silence, the simple meal tasting better to Ethan than any gourmet creation he could remember. When they finished, Lily carefully wrapped the remaining bread and tucked the jar of peanut butter away in a small box that apparently served as her pantry. "Lily," Ethan began carefully, "there are people who can help you. Social services, foster care." "No." Her response was immediate and firm. "I tried that after Mom left. The first home they put me in, the dad liked to come into the kids' room at night. The second one kept us locked in the basement when company came over because we were embarrassing. So I ran away and never went back." The matter-of-fact recitation of abuse delivered in a child's voice sent a chill through Ethan. "There are good homes too," he offered weakly. "Maybe," Lily conceded. "But I can't risk finding another bad one." She gestured around the bus. "Here, I make the rules. Nobody hurts me. Nobody pretends I don't exist except when they need someone to blame." Her words contained a wisdom far beyond her years, a wisdom forged in hardship and survival. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding that easy solutions would not apply to Lily's complex reality. "What about you?" she asked, changing the subject. "Those men who took you, will they come looking?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Probably. They went to considerable trouble to kidnap me. They won't give up easily." "What did they want?" "My company," Ethan explained. "I founded Crawford Tech 10 years ago. We've developed some important new technology recently, quantum computing breakthroughs that could change everything from medicine to artificial intelligence. Someone wants to control that technology." "So you're rich," Lily said, not as a question, but as a simple observation. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "Very." Lily nodded as if confirming something she'd already known. "That's why they took you. Rich people problems." There was no judgment in her tone, merely a pragmatic assessment. In her world, the wealthy existed in a different reality with different rules and different dangers. Ethan felt a flash of shame at the simplicity of her perception and its fundamental accuracy. "I need to contact my sister," he said after a moment. "She'll be worried sick, and my company needs to know I'm alive." "You have a phone?" Lily asked. "They took it," Ethan replied. "Is there a public phone nearby?" Lily shook her head. "Not anymore. They took out most of them years ago." She hesitated, before adding, "I have a cell phone, but it only works sometimes. The battery's bad, and I can't always find a place to charge it." She rummaged through her backpack and produced an ancient flip phone with a cracked case held together by duct tape. "I keep it for emergencies. Mrs. Wilson at the shelter lets me charge it sometimes when I bring her things." Ethan accepted the phone with something approaching reverence. This battered device represented Lily's lifeline to the world, yet she was offering it to him without hesitation. He flipped it open, unsurprised to find the battery nearly depleted. "We should save the battery," he said, closing it carefully. "I need to be stronger before I make any calls anyway. Once I contact my people, things will move very quickly." What he didn't say was that he worried about the safety implications for Lily. If his kidnappers were still searching for him, any call could potentially be traced. The risk was too great while they remained vulnerable. "You need more medicine," Lily observed, noting the flush returning to his cheeks. "And better food to get your strength back." "We both do," Ethan replied. He reached for his watch, wincing as the movement pulled at tender ribs. "Let's try again with this, not at a pawn shop where they'd ask questions, but maybe we can find a private buyer." Lily eyed the watch skeptically. "People will think I stole it." "What if we go together? Once I'm strong enough to walk?" A look of genuine alarm crossed Lily's features. "You can't go out there, those men might see you." "We'll be careful," Ethan assured her, touched by her concern. "But we need resources, Lily, and that watch is our ticket." She considered this, her young face serious with contemplation. There's a guy who buys things no questions asked. Joey. He has a shop over on Michigan Avenue behind the old theater. Not legal stuff, but he pays okay." "You know him?" "I've sold him things before," Lily admitted reluctantly. "Things I found in abandoned houses. He's not nice, but he's fair enough if you don't look scared." Ethan nodded, filing away this glimpse into the shadow economy that kept Detroit's marginalized populations afloat. "When I'm stronger, we'll go see Joey." "Maybe tomorrow," Lily suggested. "You're getting better fast." The confidence in her assessment warmed him. "Thanks to my excellent nurse." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips, the first Ethan had seen, before quickly disappearing. For just a moment, the hardened survivor had given way to the child beneath, and Ethan silently renewed his promise to himself. When this was over, Lily Matthews would never have to scavenge for survival again. The next morning broke with a rare October warmth, sunlight streaming through the bus windows in golden shafts that illuminated dust particles dancing in the air. Ethan woke to find himself alone, a folded note placed carefully beside the water jug. In neat, careful handwriting, Lily had written, "Gone to find food. Back soon. Rest." He smiled at the capitalized command, recognizing the authority in it. Despite coming from a 12-year-old, his body felt markedly improved. The antibiotics were working, and though movement still brought pain, his mind was clear and his strength returning. Carefully, he rose from the mattress and tested his ability to stand without support. His legs trembled slightly but held his weight. Progress. He made his way slowly around the confined space of the bus, each step a bit steadier than the last. By the time Lily returned, he was sitting on one of the remaining bus seats, looking more like an executive temporarily down on his luck than a kidnapping victim on the verge of collapse. "You're up?" she observed. her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely approving of this development. "Doctor's orders were to rest, not remain horizontal," Ethan replied with a smile. "Besides, we need to move forward with our plan." Lily set down her backpack, which bulged with new findings. "I got lucky today," she said, unpacking her treasures. A half-full bottle of Tylenol, a can of chicken soup, an apple, and a small battery-powered phone charger that had seen better days. "Found these in a donation box behind the church. The volunteer was inside, so I just borrowed them." The hesitation before borrowed told Ethan everything he needed to know, but he merely nodded. Moral absolutism was a luxury Lily couldn't afford. "The charger is perfect," he said, reaching for it. "We can charge your phone enough to make one call." Lily handed him the device, along with her taped-together flip phone. "It works sometimes. You have to wiggle the wire just right." Ethan examined the charger, noting its frayed cord and damaged housing. With careful manipulation, he managed to connect it to the phone, relieved when the charging icon appeared on the small screen. "It'll take time," he said. "While we wait, I'd like to try walking to the fence and back. I need to build my strength if we're going to visit your friend Joey." "He's not my friend," Lily corrected quickly. "Just someone who buys things." "Fair enough," Ethan acknowledged. "Will you help me? I might need support." Lily nodded and positioned herself beside him, her small shoulder once again offering stability as they made their way toward the bus door. The journey down the steps and across the debris-strewn lot was slow and painful, but Ethan pushed through, determined to regain his independence. "You're doing good," Lily encouraged as they reached the fence. "Better than yesterday." "Thanks to you," Ethan replied, genuinely grateful for both her physical support and her unflagging patience. "Let's head back now." As they turned, a distant sound caught their attention, the distinctive slam of car doors, followed by male voices. Lily froze, her body instantly alert like a small animal sensing danger. "Inside," she whispered urgently. "Now." They moved as quickly as Ethan's condition would allow, making it back to the bus, just as two men in dark jackets appeared at the edge of the lot. From inside, peering through a small gap in the cardboard window coverings, Lily and Ethan watched as the men surveyed the area. "They found us," Ethan whispered, his heart pounding. "How?" Lily shook her head, her expression grim. "Maybe followed me back. I'm usually careful, but—" The men moved methodically through, the lot clearly searching for something, or someone. They were well-dressed despite their surroundings, their movements precise and purposeful. One spoke into a handheld radio, gesturing toward the bus. "We need to get out of here," Lily whispered, already gathering her essentials into her backpack with practiced speed. "There's a back emergency door. It sticks, but it opens." Ethan moved toward the phone, which had gained only a minimal charge. "We need to call for help first." "No time," Lily insisted, her voice urgent but controlled. "They're coming." Indeed, the men were now approaching the bus directly, their intent unmistakable. Ethan grabbed the phone anyway, quickly dialing his sister's number from memory. It rang once before Lily snatched it from his hand. "Too late," she hissed, pulling him toward the rear of the bus. "We have to go now." The emergency exit, as Lily had warned, resisted their efforts initially, before giving way with a protesting groan of metal. They tumbled out onto the ground just as the main door of the bus crashed open, heavy footsteps announcing the intruder's entrance. "Run," Ethan urged, pushing himself to his feet with newfound adrenaline overriding his pain. "Which way?" Lily pointed toward a narrow gap between two abandoned buildings adjacent to the lot. "There, I know a way through." They moved as quietly as possible, keeping the bus between themselves and their pursuers. Lily led the way with the confident navigation of someone intimately familiar with urban escape routes, guiding Ethan through a labyrinth of alleys and overgrown lots. "Where are we going?" Ethan gasped, his brief reserves of strength already waning. "Palmer Park," Lily replied without slowing. "There's a hill with cell reception, and people around, safer." The journey was excruciating for Ethan, each step sending shards of pain through his injured body. But the alternative, being recaptured by the men who had tortured him for days, propelled him forward with desperate determination. They navigated through neighborhoods in transition, blocks of abandoned homes interspersed with pockets of renewal, urban gardens rising from vacant lots, newly renovated houses standing defiantly beside collapsed structures, Detroit's resilience and struggle written in its very landscape. After what felt like hours, but was likely only 40 minutes, they reached the southern edge of Palmer Park. Once the playground of Detroit's elite, the park had fallen into disrepair before recent community efforts had begun to reclaim it. Joggers and dog walkers populated the main paths, providing the public safety that Lily had sought. "The hill's this way," she said, leading Ethan toward a tree-covered rise near the park center. "You can rest there while you make your call." Ethan nodded, too exhausted for words. His legs trembled beneath him, and sweat soaked his shirt despite the mild temperature. As they ascended the gentle slope, he felt a wave of dizziness that nearly sent him to his knees. "Almost there," Lily encouraged, her small frame once again providing crucial support. At the crest of the hill, they found a bench facing the distant Detroit skyline. Ethan collapsed onto it, his breathing labored while Lily scanned their surroundings with the vigilance of a seasoned sentry. "No sign of them," she reported. "Try your call now." Ethan took the phone with shaking hands, noting with relief that it showed 2 bars of signal. He dialed his sister's number again, sending up a silent prayer that she would answer, an unfamiliar caller. The phone rang 3 times before a cautious female voice answered. "Hello? Becca?" Ethan gasped, emotion suddenly choking his voice. "It's me, it's Ethan." A moment of stunned silence followed, then, "Ethan? Oh my God, Ethan, where are you? We've been looking everywhere. The police, private investigators, everyone's searching for you." "I was kidnapped," he explained quickly. "I escaped with help. I'm in Palmer Park in Detroit, but I'm not safe. They're still after me." "Detroit?" Rebecca's voice registered shock. "Stay where you are. I'm calling the police right now. And Ethan, don't hang up. Please don't hang up." "The battery's almost dead," Ethan warned, watching the phone's indicator blinking ominously. "Send help to the hill on the south side. I'm with a girl named Lily. She saved my life, Becca." "A girl? What?" The phone died abruptly, cutting. Off his sister's confused question, Ethan lowered it slowly, a mixture of relief and anxiety washing over him. Help would come now, but would it arrive in time? "They'll send people," he told Lily, who had been listening intently. "Police, probably. We just need to wait here." Lily's expression darkened at the mention of police. "I can't be here when they come." "Lily, no," Ethan protested. "You need to stay. You're a witness, and you need protection too. Those men saw you." "Police and me don't mix," she said flatly. "They'll put me back in the system." "I won't let that happen," Ethan promised. "You saved my life. I'll make sure you're protected, legally, financially, everything." Uncertainty flickered across Lily's face. Throughout her young life, adults had made promises they couldn't or wouldn't keep. Why should this man be any different, wealth and gratitude notwithstanding? "You don't understand how it works," she said simply. "Rich people you don't have the same rules. Once the police and social services get involved, you won't have any say." Before Ethan could argue further, Lily stiffened, her attention caught by something beyond his shoulder. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Ethan turned to see the 2 men from earlier entering the park from the southern path, their purposeful strides and scanning gazes making their intentions clear. They hadn't spotted Ethan and Lily yet, but it was only a matter of time in the relatively open hilltop. "We need to move," Lily urged, pulling at Ethan's arm. "Now." Summoning his last reserves of strength, Ethan rose from the bench. "Which way?" Lily pointed toward a densely wooded area to the north. "Through there, then across Woodward to the neighborhoods. I know places to hide." They moved as quickly as Ethan's condition would allow, using the trees for cover. Behind them, shouts indicated they had been spotted. The pursuit had begun again. The woods provided temporary concealment, but Ethan's weakened state made swift movement impossible. Lily scouted ahead, finding the clearest paths and doubling back to guide him when necessary. His breathing became increasingly labored and fresh pain bloomed across his ribcage. "I'm slowing you down," he gasped as they paused behind a thick oak tree. "Go ahead, get somewhere safe. Help is coming for me." "No," Lily replied firmly, the steel in her voice belying her age. "We stick together." The loyalty of this child, who had every reason to trust no one, struck Ethan with profound force. He nodded, finding new determination in her unwavering resolve. They continued their flight through the park, eventually reaching Woodward Avenue, Detroit's main thoroughfare. The busy street offered both risk and opportunity, exposure, but also the safety of public visibility. "This way," Lily directed, leading them toward a commercial block where a crowd of people waited at a bus stop. They merged with the group, Ethan keeping his head down, Lily scanning constantly for their pursuers. The city bus arrived with a hiss of hydraulics, and they boarded along with the other passengers. Ethan, lacking fare, simply followed Lily's lead as she slipped past the driver with practiced invisibility. They found seats at the back, Ethan slumping with exhaustion. "Where are we going?" he asked quietly. "Away from my bus," Lily replied, her voice heavy with an emotion Ethan couldn't immediately identify. Then he realized grief. She was mourning the loss of her home, her safe place, her carefully constructed world. "I'm sorry," he said, the simple words wholly inadequate to the magnitude of her loss. Lily shrugged, her face resuming its mask of stoic acceptance. It was just stuff. But they both knew it had been much more than that. It had been her entire life, her drawings, her books, her collected treasures, the photograph of her mother, all now in the hands of the men hunting them. The bus rumbled through Detroit's streets, carrying them further from the ruins of Lily's sanctuary. Neither spoke as the city passed by outside the windows, a tableau of struggle and resilience that mirrored their own journey. The bus meandered through Detroit's varied neighborhoods, from the recovering Midtown district with its new developments and university presence to the more challenged areas where abandoned structures outnumbered occupied ones. Ethan, despite his exhaustion, found himself seeing the city with new eyes, Lily's eyes. Where he had previously noticed only blight and decay from the window of his luxury car, he now saw the subtle signs of life and community that persisted against tremendous odds. Urban gardens sprouting between vacant lots, makeshift basketball courts created from milk crates and plywood, murals splashed across crumbling walls, proclaiming Detroit never surrenders. They rode in silence, Lily vigilantly watching for their pursuers through the rear window, while Ethan fought to remain conscious. His brief burst of adrenaline-fueled energy had faded, leaving him dangerously weak. The infection that had been partially subdued by the antibiotics was reasserting itself, his body betraying him just when escape was most crucial. "Next stop," Lily whispered as they approached an intersection in a residential area Ethan didn't recognize. She pulled the stop request cord, then helped Ethan to his feet as the bus slowed. They disembarked onto a street lined with small, well-maintained brick houses, a pocket of stability in the city's uneven landscape. Lily led them toward a small park where several children played on swings while mothers and grandmothers chatted on nearby benches. "Public places are safer," she explained quietly. "Those men won't try anything with witnesses." Ethan nodded, collapsing onto the first bench they reached. His skin felt clammy, and the world had taken on a slight tilt that signaled his fever was returning with a vengeance. "We need to keep moving," Lily urged, though concern shadowed her eyes as she took in his deteriorating condition. "Just a minute," Ethan managed, his voice barely audible. "Need to rest." Lily's gaze darted around the park, assessing potential threats with the hypervigilance of someone who had learned harsh lessons about letting down her guard. A police car cruised slowly past the park's perimeter, and Ethan felt her tense beside him. "Lily," he said, forcing clarity into his voice, "the police are here to help us. My sister will have contacted them by now." Uncertainty flashed across her features. "They'll take me away." "I won't let that happen," Ethan promised again, reaching for her hand. It felt tiny and calloused in his larger grip. "You're not going back into foster care, I swear it." Before she could respond, A second police car pulled up directly in front of the park. 2 officers emerged, scanning the area with purpose. "They're looking for us," Ethan said. "This is our rescue, Lily." She began to pull away, her instinct for flight overwhelming all else, but Ethan maintained his gentle grip on her hand. "Trust me," he pleaded. "Just this once. I know adults have failed you before, but I'm asking you to trust me now." Their eyes locked in a moment of silent communication, Ethan's filled with sincere promise, Lily's with the wariness of a child who had learned through bitter experience that trust was often prelude to betrayal. Finally, something shifted in her gaze. Not quite trust, but perhaps the barest willingness to hope. "Okay," she whispered, staying by his side as he raised his free hand to signal the officers. The response was immediate. The policemen approached, quickly, hands moving instinctively toward their holstered weapons as they assessed the situation. "I'm Ethan Crawford," Ethan called out, his voice stronger than he'd expected. "I believe my sister Rebecca Crawford reported me missing." The officers exchanged a glance of surprise before the older one spoke into his radio, confirming Ethan's identity. Within moments, their demeanor shifted from cautious to protective. "Mr. Crawford, we've been searching for you for days," the younger officer said, relief evident in his voice. "Are you injured? We'll call an ambulance immediately." "Yes, please," Ethan confirmed. "And this is Lily. She rescued me from my kidnappers. She stays with me. That's non-negotiable." The officers again exchanged glances, clearly uncertain, about protocol regarding the ragged child clutching Ethan's hand. The older officer, noting Ethan's deteriorating condition, made an executive decision. "Let's get you both to the hospital first," he said diplomatically. "We can sort out the details there." Within minutes, an ambulance arrived with wailing sirens. Paramedics swarmed around Ethan, checking vital signs and establishing an IV line with practiced efficiency. Throughout the whirlwind of activity, he maintained his grip on Lily's hand, refusing to be separated even as they loaded him onto a stretcher. "She comes with me," he insisted, his voice now fading as medical intervention allowed his body to finally surrender to its exhaustion. The paramedics, noting the desperation in his tone, nodded their agreement. Lily climbed into the ambulance behind Ethan's stretcher, her small frame dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding them. As the doors closed and the vehicle began its journey toward Detroit Medical Center, Ethan felt consciousness slipping away, darkness encroaching at the edges of his vision. His last sight before succumbing was Lily's face, a mixture of fear and determination etched across features too young to bear such adult concerns. "Stay with me," he whispered, unsure if the words actually passed his lips before the world went black. Ethan awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors and the distinctive antiseptic smell of a medical environment. Sunlight streamed through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across crisp white sheets. For a moment, disorientation clouded his mind. Where was the bus, the cardboard? Floor, the makeshift bed? Where was Lily? Memory rushed back with jarring clarity. He attempted to sit up, only to be restrained by an IV line in one arm and the protests of his still healing body. "Easy there, big brother," came a familiar voice from his right. "You're not ready for gymnastics just yet." Ethan turned to see his sister Rebecca, sitting in a vinyl hospital chair, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of prolonged worry. Uncombed hair hastily pulled back, wrinkled clothes, dark circles beneath her eyes. Despite these signs of strain, her smile was brilliant with relief. "Becca," he croaked, his throat dry and voice rusty. "How long?" "You've been out for nearly 36 hours, she replied, rising to pour him a cup of water from a plastic pitcher. "The doctors said your body needed time to recover from the infection and everything else." Her voice caught slightly on the last words. Ethan accepted the water gratefully, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. As clarity returned, so did his most pressing concern. "Where's Lily?" he asked urgently. "The girl who was with me?" Rebecca's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "The child services people came for her yesterday. Given the circumstances—" "No," Ethan interrupted, genuine panic rising in his chest. "I promised her. I promised she wouldn't go back into the system." He struggled to rise again, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. Rebecca placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Calm down, Ethan. She's fine. I intervened before they could take her." Ethan stilled, searching his sister's face. "What do you mean?" Rebecca sighed, settling back into her chair. "When I arrived at the hospital and found out what happened, how this homeless child essentially saved your life, I couldn't let them just whisk her away. So I might have implied that our family had a prior relationship with her, that we were already in the process of becoming her guardians before your kidnapping." Ethan stared at his sister in amazement. Rebecca Crawford, corporate attorney, and stickler for rules and procedures, had lied to government officials to protect a child she'd never met. "You did that for her? For me?" Rebecca shrugged, though the casual gesture couldn't disguise the emotion behind it. "You were holding her hand so tightly they practically had to pry your fingers apart when you lost consciousness. I figured she must be pretty special." Relief washed over Ethan. She absolutely is. Where is she now?" "At the Crawford estate with Mrs. Winters looking after her," Rebecca replied, referring to their family's longtime housekeeper. "She's safe, clean, and probably eating her 5th meal since arriving. That child was severely undernourished." Ethan nodded, unsurprised by this assessment. "She's been living in an abandoned school bus, Becca, surviving on whatever she could scavenge or steal." Rebecca's eyes widened. "She told us about the bus, but not much else. She's not exactly forthcoming with information." "She doesn't trust easily," Ethan explained, "and with good reason." He proceeded to share what he knew of Lily's story, the mother's disappearance, the failed foster placements, the years alone on Detroit streets. As he spoke, Rebecca's expression transformed from shock to outrage to profound sadness. "My God, Ethan, all this time we've been living in our bubble, and children like her are just trying to survive a few miles away." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "It changes everything, doesn't it?" A comfortable silence fell between the siblings as they contemplated the invisible lines that had divided their privileged existence from Lily's desperate one, lines that seemed increasingly arbitrary and unjust. "What happened with the kidnappers?" Ethan finally asked. "Have they been caught?" Rebecca's expression hardened. "2 men were arrested near Palmer Park shortly after your rescue. They're in custody, but they're not talking yet. The police believe they're just hired muscle, not the masterminds." "They're not," Ethan confirmed. "Someone powerful is behind this, someone who wanted control of Crawford Tech's quantum computing patents." "We have suspicions," Rebecca said carefully. "Davidson at Quantum Sphere has been making noise about unfair advantages in the market. And there were those unusual stock movements right before your disappearance, someone betting big that our value would drop precipitously." Ethan nodded, the business implications of his ordeal beginning to take shape in his mind. But they seemed distant and somehow less important than they would have just a week ago. His priorities had undergone a seismic shift. "How soon can I leave the hospital?" he asked. Rebecca frowned. "The doctors want to keep you for at least another day. You were in rough shape, Ethan. Severe dehydration, infection, multiple contusions, possible concussion." "I need to see Lily," he interrupted. "I made her a promise, Becca." His sister studied him thoughtfully. "She asks about you every few hours, you know. Always the same question. Is Mr. Crawford okay? Not when you'll wake up or when she can see you, just if you're okay." The simple concern in Lily's question touched something deep within Ethan. "She's been taking care of herself for so long," he said softly. "And then she took care of me when she had every reason to just walk away." "She's remarkable," Rebecca agreed. "But Ethan, what's your plan here? Child Services is giving us temporary leeway because of the unusual circumstances and our family's standing. But eventually they'll want permanent arrangements." "I know," Ethan replied, a certainty solidifying within him. "And I've made my decision. I'm going to adopt her, Becca." Rebecca's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Adopt her? Ethan, you're a single man with a multinational corporation to run. You work 18-hour days, you travel constantly. How would you possibly—" "I'll change," Ethan said simply. "I'll delegate more, cut back my hours, reduce travel, whatever it takes." "This isn't like adopting a puppy," Rebecca cautioned. "This is a traumatized child with complex needs. She'll need therapy, Specialized education to catch up, stability, consistent caregiving, all of which I can provide, Ethan insisted. Money isn't the issue here. No, but time and experience are, Rebecca countered gently. I'm not saying it's impossible, just that you need to think this through carefully. For her sake as much as yours. Ethan fell silent, acknowledging the wisdom in his sister's words. The impulse to protect Lily, to give her everything she'd been denied, burned within him with surprising intensity. But Rebecca was right. Lily deserved thoughtful planning, not just good intentions. Will you help me, he finally asked, figure out the right way to do this, huh? Rebecca's expression softened. Of course I will. But first, let's focus on getting you well enough to leave this hospital. Then we can talk about expanding the Crawford family. The rest of the day passed in a blur of medical checks, police interviews, and business updates delivered by Rebecca and Ethan's executive team, who visited briefly in the afternoon. Throughout it all, Ethan's thoughts continually returned to Lily, alone in the unfamiliar grandeur of the Crawford estate, surrounded by luxuries she'd never known, yet undoubtedly missing the simple security of her bus sanctuary. As evening approached and visitors departed, Ethan found himself alone with his thoughts for the first time since his rescue. The hospital room, with its private bathroom, television, and adjustable bed, represented a level of comfort that would have seemed unremarkable to him a week ago. Now, he couldn't help but see it through Lily's eyes, the wasteful excess of unused toiletries, the casual luxury of climate control, the assumption of safety that allowed him to sleep without one eye open. His near brush with death had clarified much, but nothing more profoundly than the arbitrary nature of privilege. He had done nothing to deserve his wealth beyond being born into the right family and leveraging the exceptional education that birthright had provided. Lily had done nothing to deserve her hardship beyond having the misfortune of a mother who disappeared. As darkness fell outside his window, Ethan made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, Lily Matthews would never again have to fight for basic survival. Whether she ultimately became his daughter or found another path, he would ensure that her intelligence, resilience, and extraordinary heart were given every opportunity to flourish. With that promise firmly anchored in his mind, Ethan finally surrendered to healing sleep, dreaming not of his ordeal, but of a rusty yellow bus transformed into a palace by a child's imagination, a palace where safety was never in question and promises were always kept. 3 days later, Ethan's town car pulled through the wrought-iron gates of the Crawford estate, the manicured grounds stretching out before him in manicured perfection. Located in Bloomfield Hills, one of Michigan's wealthiest enclaves, the family home had always represented security and privilege to Ethan. Now, as the car crunched along the circular gravel driveway, he found himself wondering how intimidating this display of wealth must appear to a child accustomed to finding shelter in abandoned vehicles. Mrs. Winters, the Crawfords' housekeeper of 20 years, greeted him at the door with the warm efficiency that had been a constant throughout his life. "Welcome home, Mr. Crawford," she said, her usual formality softened by genuine relief. "We've been so worried." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters," Ethan replied, embracing the older woman briefly. "How is our guest doing?" A shadow crossed the housekeeper's normally impassive features. "She's adjusting, sir. A remarkable child, but very guarded. She barely speaks unless spoken to, eats like food might be taken away at any moment, and I found her sleeping on the floor, beside the bed the first night, wrapped in a blanket rather than using the covers." Ethan nodded, unsurprised by this description. "Where is she now?" "In the library, sir. She discovered the books yesterday and has hardly left since." With a grateful nod to Mrs. Winters, Ethan made his way through the grand foyer toward the estate's library, a 2-story room lined with custom mahogany shelving, housing the collection begun by his grandfather and expanded by subsequent generations. As he approached the open double doors, he slowed, taking a moment to observe without being noticed. Lily sat cross-legged on the library's window seat, a large volume open in her lap. She wore new clothes, jeans, and a simple blue sweater that Rebecca must have purchased. but they hung loosely on her small frame, emphasizing how undernourished she remained. Her hair, now clean and brushed, fell in dark waves around a face still too serious for her years. Most striking was her complete absorption in the book before her, her fingers tracing the text with reverent attention. The complete works of Shakespeare, Ethan commented as he entered, recognizing the distinctive binding. Pretty advanced reading. Lily's head snapped up, her body tensing momentarily before recognition relaxed her posture slightly. "Mr. Crawford," she acknowledged, "you're better." "Thanks to you," he replied, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the other end of the window seat. Lily nodded, carefully marking her place in the book before closing it. "Actually, don't stop on my account," Ethan said, settling himself comfortably. "Which play were you reading?" "The Tempest," Lily answered, a hint of defensiveness in her tone, as if expecting disbelief that she could comprehend such material. "An excellent choice," Ethan said casually. "Prospero and Miranda stranded on their island. Magic and revenge. And eventual forgiveness. What do you think of it so far?" Surprise flickered across Lily's features at being asked her opinion rather than quizzed on her understanding. "I think Prospero is wrong," she said after a moment's consideration. "He's so focused on getting revenge that he doesn't see how it's hurting Miranda." The insight, remarkable from a child her age, revealed an emotional intelligence honed by hardship. "That's very perceptive," Ethan acknowledged. "I think you're right." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the library's parquet floors. Ethan studied Lily surreptitiously, noting the wariness that still animated her posture despite the comfortable surroundings. "How are you finding everything here?" he finally asked. Lily shrugged, her gaze drifting to the manicured gardens visible through the window. "It's nice," she said noncommittally. "Mrs. Winters is kind." "But it's not home," Ethan finished for her. Lily's eyes snapped back to his, surprise evident in them. "My bus wasn't much of a home," she said, a defensive note entering her voice. "It was yours," Ethan replied simply. "You made it that way. This place must feel very strange to you." Something in his acknowledgement seemed to reach her. "Everything is so big," she admitted, "and there are so many things no one seems to use, like the dining room with all those chairs, but everyone eats in the kitchen." Ethan smiled at her observation. "You're right. This house has a lot of spaces designed more for show than living. My parents were big on appearances." "Where are they now?" Lily asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming her reserve. "They passed. Away 5 years ago," Ethan replied. "Car accident on their way to their winter home in Florida." "I'm sorry," Lily said, the simple words carrying genuine empathy. "Thank you," Ethan acknowledged. "I miss them, but I was an adult when it happened. Nothing like what you've experienced." Lily's expression closed immediately, her momentary openness vanishing behind the protective wall she'd built around her emotions. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Ethan recognized the deflection for what it was, a survival mechanism developed through years of self-reliance. "Of course you are," he agreed. "You're probably the most capable person I've ever met, regardless of age. But that doesn't mean you haven't lost things that mattered." Lily remained silent, her fingers tracing the embossed lettering on the book's cover. "I went back to your bus yesterday," Ethan said quietly. Her head jerked up, eyes widening. "You did?" Ethan nodded. "The police have finished their investigation there. I wanted to see if anything could be salvaged." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it out to her. "I found this under one of the seats." Lily stared at the item in his palm. A small teddy bear, worn nearly bare in places, missing one eye and most of its stuffing. Her hand moved toward it instinctively before she stopped herself, as if fearing a trick or test. "It's yours," Ethan assured her. "I remember seeing it in your box of important things." Slowly, with a reverence that made Ethan's chest tighten, Lily took the bear, cradling it against her chest. "Mr. Buttons," she whispered. "My mom gave him to me when I was little." "I'm sorry we couldn't find more," Ethan said gently. "The men who were looking for us, they damaged a lot of your things." Lily nodded, her expression stoic despite the emotion Ethan could sense beneath the surface. "Things don't matter," she said with practiced detachment. "I can always find more stuff." The casual dismissal of her few treasures, necessitated by a life of transience and loss, struck Ethan more powerfully than any display of grief might have. This child had learned to surrender attachments as a defense against the pain of inevitable loss. "Lily," he began carefully, "we need to talk about what happens next, about your future." Wariness immediately returned to her posture. "The lady from the government came yesterday," she said flatly. "She asked a lot of questions." "Ms. Patel from Child Protective Services," Ethan clarified. "Yes, she's assessing your situation." "I'm not going back to foster care," Lily stated, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll run away again." "That's not what I want either," Ethan assured. "In fact, I've been discussing alternatives with my sister and the authorities." Lily watched him with guarded eyes, clearly accustomed to adults making life-altering decisions about her without genuine consultation. "I'd like to become your legal guardian," Ethan said directly, believing honesty was the only approach Lily would respect. "Eventually, if it's what you want too, that could become adoption." Lily's expression remained carefully neutral, though Ethan detected a flicker of something fear, in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" she asked, the question practical rather than emotional. "Because you saved my life," Ethan began, "but it's more than gratitude. In the time we spent together, I came to admire your intelligence, your resilience, your compassion. I believe you deserve every opportunity life can offer, and I'm in a position to provide those opportunities." "You don't know me," Lily countered, the protest sounding rehearsed, as if she'd anticipated this conversation. "Not really." "I know enough," Ethan replied simply. "I know you're smarter than most adults I employ. I know you have extraordinary courage and resourcefulness. I know you maintained your humanity and kindness despite a world that showed you little of either." Lily looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "What if I mess up? What if I'm not? What do you expect?" The question revealed the heart of her fear, that any home offered would come with conditions she might fail to meet. Ethan chose his next words carefully. "Lily, this isn't a trial period or a conditional offer. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting a normal kid who will have good days and bad days, who will make mistakes and learn from them. Just like I make mistakes." Skepticism showed plainly on her face. "Rich people don't make mistakes." The observation startled a laugh from Ethan. "Oh, we absolutely do. Sometimes spectacular ones. The difference is we usually have enough money and connections to cushion the fall." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips before quickly disappearing. "What about school?" she asked, changing the subject to more practical matters. "I haven't been to real school in 3 years." "We'd figure that out together," Ethan replied. "Maybe a tutor at first to help you catch up. Then whatever school environment seems best, public, private, alternative. What matters is finding what works for you." Lily fell silent, absorbing this information with the careful consideration she applied to all survival calculations. Finally, she asked the question that seemed to matter most to her. "Would I have to stay here in this house?" Ethan considered her query thoughtfully. "Not necessarily. This is my family home, but I actually live in a penthouse downtown most of the time, closer to the company headquarters. Or we could find somewhere new entirely, somewhere that could be ours, not just mine that you're joining." The distinction seemed significant to Lily, who nodded slowly. "I'd have my own room, with a door that locks?" The request, so basic yet revealing of past violations of privacy and safety, tightened something in Ethan's chest. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "Your space would be yours, private and secure." Another lengthy silence followed as Lily processed everything. When she finally spoke, her question caught Ethan off guard. "What about the other kids like me? The ones still out there?" The query focused not on her own welfare but on those still struggling. As she had, revealed a compassion that humbled Ethan. "That's a very good question," he acknowledged, "and not one I have a complete answer for yet, but perhaps it's something we could work on together." For the first time, genuine interest animated Lily's features. How? I have resources, financial, political, social, that could be directed toward helping Detroit's homeless youth, Ethan explained. But I lack the first-hand knowledge you possess. Together, we might create something meaningful. Lily considered, this clearly intrigued by the possibility of helping others who shared her experiences. You'd really listen to my ideas? I'd be foolish not to, Ethan replied sincerely. You're the expert on what kids in your situation actually need, not some consultant with a degree, but no lived experience. This approach, treating her as a valuable collaborator rather than just a charity case, seemed to resonate with Lily in a way that promises of material comfort had not. She straightened slightly, a spark of engagement replacing her defensive posture. There's a lot of empty buildings that could be fixed up, she said, thinking aloud. Not just for sleeping, but for learning too. And jobs. Kids need ways to earn. Money that aren't dangerous. Ethan nodded encouragingly. These are excellent starting points. The Crawford Foundation could fund initiatives like these. Would I still be able to visit places like my bus? Lily asked hesitantly. Not to live there, just to check on friends sometimes? The question revealed another layer of Lily's world, the community connections she'd established even in her solitary existence. Of course, Ethan assured her. I wouldn't want to cut you off from people who matter to you. I just want to make sure you're safe. Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. She fell silent again, absently stroking the worn teddy bear in her lap as she processed everything they'd discussed. You don't have to decide anything today, Ethan said gently. This is a big change to consider. Take all the time you need. What if I say no? Lily asked bluntly, testing the boundaries of his offer. Then we'd find another solution that you're comfortable with, Ethan replied without hesitation. My goal is your well-being, Lily, not my own agenda. You've had enough of adults making decisions without considering your wishes. Something in his answer seemed to reach her. A barely perceptible relaxation occurred in her shoulders, a subtle softening around her eyes. I'd like to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Ethan agreed, recognizing the tremendous significance of her not immediately rejecting the proposal. For a child who had learned to expect disappointment, even considering the possibility represented a monumental act of courage. They lapsed into companionable silence as the library darkened with approaching evening. Lily eventually reopened. Her book, returning to Shakespeare's tale of exile and reconciliation. Ethan, sensing her need for space, rose quietly. Dinner will be ready soon, he said. I'll be in my office down the hall if you need anything. Lily nodded without looking up from her reading, but as Ethan reached the doorway, her voice stopped him. Mr. Crawford. He turned back. Yes? Thank you, she said simply, for finding Mr. Buttons. The gratitude, offered for the recovery, of a shabby teddy bear rather than the life-changing proposal he'd just presented, spoke volumes about Lily's values and the emotional significance of the small treasures that had sustained her through years of hardship. You're welcome, Ethan replied, understanding that the thanks encompassed far more than the bear. And Lily, my friends call me Ethan. A hint of a genuine smile touched her lips before she ducked her head back to her book. It wasn't acceptance, not yet. But it was the beginning of possibility, a tiny crack in the formidable walls she'd built around her heart. 2 weeks later, Ethan stood in the center of an empty penthouse in downtown Detroit, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline and the Detroit River beyond. The space was a blank canvas, recently purchased and not yet furnished, its polished concrete floors and exposed brick walls awaiting transformation. What do you think? He asked, turning to Lily, who stood silently absorbing the environment. She moved slowly through the open-concept living area, her fingers trailing along the cool surface of a granite kitchen island, her eyes drawn repeatedly to the dramatic views. It's very high up, she observed, approaching the windows cautiously. 42nd floor, Ethan confirmed. Not everyone likes heights, though. If it makes you uncomfortable. No, Lily interrupted, placing her palm flat against the glass. I like it. You can see everything from here. Her gaze traveled across the city landscape, from the Renaissance Center's distinctive towers to the distant Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit to Canada. You can even see where my bus was, she added quietly, pointing toward the eastern neighborhoods. Ethan joined her at the window, following her gesture to the area that had been her home for years. That's one reason I chose this building, he admitted. I thought you might appreciate being able to see the whole city, both worlds. Lily nodded, understanding the symbolism without need for elaboration. Over the past 2 weeks, she had begun to navigate the strange new reality of safety and privilege while still honoring the experiences that had shaped her. It was a delicate balance, one that Ethan was learning to support without imposing his own expectations. There are 3 bedrooms, he continued, leading her down a hallway. I thought this one might be yours. The room he indicated was spacious but not overwhelming, with the same impressive windows as the main living area. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, this room was not entirely empty. A simple platform bed, with a blue comforter occupied one wall, while a desk and bookshelf stood nearby. I know you'll want to choose most of your own things, Ethan explained quickly, but I thought you might like to have some basics in place. Rebecca helped pick the bed. Lily entered the room slowly, her expression unreadable as she took in the space. She ran her hand along the desktop, opened and closed the closet door, and finally sat on the edge of the bed, testing its firmness. It has a lock, she noted, glancing at the doorknob. As promised, Ethan confirmed. Your space, your privacy. Lily nodded, then surprised him by lying back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. It's weird, she said after a moment, having so much space just for me. Good weird or bad weird? Ethan asked, leaning against the doorframe. Lily considered the question. Just weird, she finally decided, but I think I could get used to it. It wasn't enthusiasm, but from Lily it represented significant progress. In the 2 weeks since Ethan's proposal, she had neither fully accepted nor rejected the arrangement, instead existing in a cautious middle ground of trying it out. Each day without her disappearing back to the streets felt like a small victory. The building has a rooftop garden, Ethan mentioned. I thought you might like to grow some plants, maybe vegetables like you had in your bus. Lily sat up, genuine interest flickering in her eyes. Really? They'd let me plant things? It's our building now, Ethan reminded her gently. We can plant whatever we want up there. The concept of ownership, of having legitimate claim to space, was still foreign to Lily after years of existing in the margins, claiming only what others had discarded or forgotten. Could we have tomatoes? She asked, a hint of enthusiasm breaking through her usual reserve. And maybe herbs. Mrs. Winters said herbs are easy to grow. Absolutely, Ethan agreed, pleased by her engagement. We could set up a whole garden area. The previous owner installed irrigation systems, so it would be fairly simple. As they continued their tour of the penthouse, Lily gradually offered more suggestions. Tentative at first, then with increasing confidence, as Ethan consistently responded with genuine consideration rather than dismissal. By the time they reached the main living area again, she was actively participating in imagining the space they might create together. I think we should have big bookshelves, she declared, gesturing to one wall, all the way to the ceiling with one of those rolling ladder things. A library ladder, Ethan supplied, smiling at the image. I like that idea very much. We could bring some of the books from Bloomfield Hills and add new ones too. They stood together in comfortable silence, contemplating the potential of the empty space around them. Outside, the afternoon sun illuminated the city, highlighting both its scars and its beauty, the abandoned structures standing in stark contrast to the areas of vibrant renewal. This could really be our home, Lily said quietly, the statement somewhere between question and realization. It could, Ethan agreed, if that's what you want. Lily turned to face him directly, her expression serious. Why do you really want to do this? The truth. The directness of her question didn't surprise Ethan. Throughout their evolving relationship, Lily had demonstrated an unfailing ability to cut through pretense and politeness to the heart of matters. "The truth is, complicated," he answered honestly. "Part of it is gratitude. You saved my life at great risk to your own. Part of it is admiration for who you are and who you might become with the right opportunities. And part of it—" He paused, searching for words that would ring true to her finely tuned authenticity detector. "Part of it is more selfish. My life before was successful by conventional standards, but something was missing. Purpose beyond profit, connection beyond transactions." Lily listened intently, her gaze never wavering from his face. "When I was in that basement, certain I would die," Ethan continued, "I didn't think about Crawford Tech's stock price or the next product launch. I thought about relationships I'd neglected, chances I hadn't taken to make a difference beyond my own narrow world. Then you appeared, this extraordinary child with every reason to distrust me, and you helped anyway. It changed my perspective on everything. So I'm like, your second chance?" Lily asked, her tone neutral rather than accusatory. "More like a wake-up call," Ethan clarified. "You reminded me what matters. And yes, helping you matters to me. But not as some charitable project or debt repayment, as a relationship that could benefit us both." Lily considered his words with the careful deliberation she applied to all important decisions. "Miss Patel says there will be a lot of paperwork and court visits," she finally said. "To make it legal." "There will," Ethan confirmed. "The formal guardianship process takes time, but Rebecca's handling most of the legal details, and Judge Wilson, she's overseeing the case, seems supportive of our arrangement." "Because you're rich and important," Lily observed without rancor. "That certainly doesn't hurt," Ethan acknowledged honestly. "The system responds to power and privilege. It's not fair, but in this case we can use that advantage for something good." Lily wandered back to the windows, gazing out at the city that had both nurtured and challenged her. "What if I'm not good at being normal?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Living in a fancy place, going to school, all that?" Ethan joined her at the window, careful to maintain the respectful distance she still preferred. "First, there's no such thing as normal, just different ways of being human. Second, no one expects you to transform overnight. This will be an adjustment for both of us. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Lily nodded slowly, seemingly reassured by his lack of unrealistic expectations. They stood together in companionable silence, watching boats navigate the Detroit River far below. "There's something I need to tell you," Lily said finally, her voice taking on a gravity that immediately captured Ethan's full attention. "About my mom." Ethan turned to face her, recognizing the significance of her willingness to discuss this closely guarded subject. "I'm listening," he said simply. Lily kept her gaze fixed on the distant horizon, as if the physical distance from the events she was about to relate made them easier to share. "She didn't just disappear," she began quietly. "She was sick for a long time before that, not like a cold in her mind. Sometimes she'd be fine, taking care of me, making plans. Then she'd get really sad or really excited, talking fast about things that didn't make sense." "Bipolar disorder," Ethan suggested gently. Lily shrugged. "Maybe. We didn't have doctors or anything, but she tried to take care of me, even when she was confused. She'd leave notes with little hearts on them when she had to go out. She called me her little warrior." Her voice caught slightly on the endearment, but she continued steadily. "The last time she said she was going to get dinner and a surprise. She seemed okay that day, happy, but not too happy. When she didn't come back, I waited 3 days before the landlord came. I thought maybe she'd come back still, so after they kicked us out, I stayed near our neighborhood for months." Ethan remained silent, honoring her disclosure with his complete attention. "I found out what happened last year," Lily continued, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. "There was a story in a newspaper someone threw away, a woman's body found in the river. It had been there a long time, but they finally identified her from dental records or something. There was a picture, not of her body, but an old photo. It was my mom." The revelation struck Ethan with physical force, the magnitude of this child's loss and the solitary way she had borne it. "Lily, I'm so sorry," he said, resisting the urge to offer physical comfort she might not welcome. The paper said she probably fell in by accident, Lily continued flatly. But I don't think so. She went to the river sometimes when she was really sad, said the water calmed her mind. Understanding dawned on Ethan. Lily had been carrying not just the grief of loss but the weight of believing her mother had chosen to leave her permanently, whether through deliberate action or the neglect of severe mental illness. That's why I kept living in the bus instead of going back to foster care, Lily explained. I needed to be where I could remember her when she was good, when she made cupcakes with pink frosting and called me her warrior. The social workers just talked about her like she was bad, like she failed because she was sick. She wasn't bad, Ethan affirmed gently. She was ill and doing her best in impossible circumstances. Lily nodded, accepting his validation with visible relief. I never told anyone that before, she admitted. About the newspaper. About knowing. The trust implicit in her disclosure humbled Ethan. Thank you for telling me, he said simply. It helps me understand better. Lily turned from the window to face him directly, her expression solemn but resolute. If I stay with you, if we do this guardian thing, I don't want to pretend she didn't exist. Some of the foster homes, they wouldn't let me talk about her. At all. We would never do that, Ethan assured her firmly. Your mother will always be part of your story, part of who you are. Nothing and no one should ever try to erase that. Something shifted in Lily's expression, a subtle relaxation, as if a long-held tension had finally eased. She nodded once decisively, then delivered the words Ethan had been hoping to hear. Okay, she said simply. Let's try. For real. The significance of her declaration, this cautious extension of trust from a child who had every reason to withhold, it filled Ethan with a sense of both responsibility and possibility. For real, he echoed, offering his hand to seal the agreement in a way that respected her boundaries. Lily regarded his outstretched hand for a moment before surprising him, by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around his waist in a brief, awkward hug. Before he could fully register the unprecedented contact, she had already stepped back, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. That's how normal families do it, right? She asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. Some do, Ethan replied, careful not to overemphasize the significance of her gesture. But we'll figure out our own way of being a family. No instruction manual required. Lily's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Good, because I'm not great at following instructions anyway. So I've noticed, Ethan replied with matching humor. Now, how about we get some lunch and start making plans for this place? I was thinking the rooftop garden could include a small greenhouse for year-round growing. As they left the penthouse together, Ethan realized that the vast empty space already felt different, no longer merely a property investment, but the beginning of a home. Not because of the walls or windows or location, but because of the silent agreement that had just passed between them, to try, together, to build something neither had fully experienced before, a family chosen rather than assigned, based on mutual respect rather than obligation. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Ethan and Lily stood together on the rooftop garden of their now transformed penthouse. The space had bloomed under their joint care, raised beds bursting with vegetable seedlings, herbs growing in carefully labeled containers, and comfortable seating arranged to maximize the spectacular city views. Today was significant. Judge Wilson had officially approved Ethan's permanent guardianship of Lily, with a path to adoption clearly established if both parties continued to desire it. The legal proceeding had been brief but meaningful, the judge commenting on the remarkable progress evident in both Lily's academic assessments and emotional well-being. So it's official now? Lily asked, kneeling to tend a row of tomato seedlings. She had started from seeds. At 13, she had grown taller and healthier over the months in Ethan's care, though she maintained the self-sufficiency that had kept her alive on the streets. It's official, Ethan confirmed, handing her a small watering can. You're stuck with me unless you decide otherwise when you turn 18. Lily accepted the watering can with a now familiar half-smile. I guess I can handle that, she said with feigned nonchalance that didn't quite mask her satisfaction. Their relationship had evolved gradually, trust built through consistency, through promises kept and boundaries respected. There had been challenges, nightmares and hoarding food and occasional fierce independence that rejected help even when needed. But there had also been triumphs. Lily's accelerated progress with her tutors, her budding interest in urban agriculture, and most recently, her willingness to meet other children through a carefully selected community program. Perhaps most significant was the project they had developed together, the Matthews Initiative, named in honor of Lily's mother. Using Crawford tech resources and Lily's first-hand expertise, they had established a foundation specifically addressing the needs of Detroit's homeless youth and children in unstable family situations. The program's first achievement, a renovated building offering safe emergency housing, education resources, and legitimate employment opportunities for teens, had opened the previous month. "I was thinking," Lily said, carefully patting soil, around a seedling, "about the new Matthews house on the east side." "What about it?" Ethan asked, settling into a nearby chair with his morning coffee. "It needs a garden, too. The kids there should get to grow things." Ethan smiled at her characteristic blend of practicality and compassion. "I think that's an excellent idea. Would you want to help design it?" Lily nodded, her focus remaining on her plants. "I already sketched some plans. Ms. Rodriguez said the empty lot next door is available. We could put in raised beds, maybe fruit trees eventually." The casual "we," indicating her personal investment in the project rather than simply delegating it to Ethan's resources, represented significant progress in her willingness to build lasting connections to the world around her. "I'd like to see those plans when you're ready," Ethan said. "And maybe talk to the architectural team about incorporating your ideas into the next phase." Lily glanced up from her gardening, a hint of surprise in her expression. "You think they'd listen to me? I'm just a kid." "You're not just anything," Ethan replied firmly. "You're the expert on what would have helped you when you were in that situation. That makes your perspective invaluable." A faint blush colored Lily's cheeks at the praise, though she tried to hide it by returning her attention to the seedlings. "Maybe we could put in one of those tower garden things. They don't take up much space but grow a lot of food." Vertical. "Hydroponics," Ethan supplied. "Excellent space utilization. Very efficient." "Yeah, that," Lily agreed. "And maybe sunflowers too, not just vegetables. Kids should get to see pretty things growing, not just useful ones." The distinction between mere survival and the possibility of beauty struck Ethan as profoundly significant. Lily was no longer thinking solely in terms of basic needs, but expanding her vision to include joy and aesthetic pleasure, signs of a child beginning to thrive rather than merely survive. "Beauty is essential," he agreed. "Not a luxury." Lily nodded, satisfied with his understanding. She worked in companionable silence for a few more minutes before speaking again, her voice casual, but with an underlying current of importance. "I've been thinking about school too," she said, not looking up from her task. Maybe I'm ready to try the academy in the fall if the offer still stands." The statement represented a monumental shift from her previous insistence on continuing with private tutors rather than attending Detroit Community Academy, the progressive school Ethan had suggested months earlier. "The offer absolutely stands," Ethan confirmed, careful to moderate his enthusiasm to avoid overwhelming her. "Principal Harmon mentioned just last week that they'd welcome you whenever you felt ready." Lily shrugged, maintaining her studied nonchalance. "Miss Chen says I'm doing ninth grade work now in most subjects, and the academy has that urban agriculture program you showed me." "It does," Ethan agreed, "and a remarkable engineering department. I thought their robotics lab might interest you too." "Maybe," Lily allowed, though the spark in her eyes betrayed her interest. "I could at least visit again, see what it's like when students are actually there." "We can arrange that any time," Ethan assured her. "No pressure either way." Lily finished her gardening task and sat back on her heels, surveying her work with satisfaction. The morning sunlight caught in her dark hair, highlighting subtle auburn. Tones that had emerged as proper nutrition improved her overall health. She looked in that moment Like any 13-year-old girl proud of a project well executed, the shadow of the street-hardened child still visible, but no longer defining her entirely. "Ethan," she said, using his first name, a practice that had gradually replaced the formal Mr. Crawford over the months. "Thanks for everything." The simple gratitude, offered freely rather than extracted, warmed him more deeply than any corporate achievement ever had. "You're welcome," he replied, "though I think we're helping each other figure this out." Lily nodded, accepting this, framing of their relationship as mutual rather than charity-based. She rose from her gardening, brushing soil from her knees, and moved to the rooftop's edge, where a telescope had been installed, a birthday gift from Rebecca that had quickly become one of Lily's favorite possessions. As she adjusted the instrument to focus on some distant point of interest, Ethan observed the confident set of her shoulders, the quiet determination that had kept her alive on Detroit streets, now channeled into learning and growth and even tentative dreams of a future. The transformation wasn't complete, perhaps never would be, but the trajectory was unmistakable. Their unlikely family, formed in crisis, tested by trauma, strengthened by choice, had become something neither could have imagined in that abandoned Packard plant building. Not a perfect fairy tale ending, but something far more valuable. An authentic beginning, built on truth rather than illusion, on mutual respect rather than obligation. From the desperate darkness of a kidnapper's basement to the sunlit rooftop, garden of a shared home, they had traveled a journey measured not just in physical distance, but in the more significant terrain of human connection. Two souls from worlds that should never have intersected, now building a bridge between those worlds, not just for themselves, but for others who might follow. "Look," Lily called, gesturing Ethan toward the telescope. "You can see all the way to the lake on a clear day like this." As Ethan joined her at the railing, he reflected that clear vision was perhaps the greatest gift they had given each other, the ability to see beyond circumstances to possibilities, beyond past wounds to future healing, beyond the arbitrary boundaries that divided human experience into separate and unequal domains. Together, they gazed out at the horizon, where the Detroit skyline met the endless blue of sky and distant water, a view that encompassed both the city's scars and its undeniable beauty, its painful past and its promising future, its ongoing challenges and its remarkable resilience. Much like the unlikely family now viewing it together.